I still remember the exact moment my heart finally turned to stone. After 25 years of teaching children to value kindness and respect, it was ironic that my own child would be the one to shatter those principles so completely. But that's how life teaches its hardest lessons, isn't it? Through the people we least expect to hurt us. You spend decades nurturing others, believing that love and patience will eventually be rewarded with the same kindness you've given. And then one day, one moment, one cruel sentence, and everything you've built crumbles. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. This journey is about more than family drama. It's about recognizing your own worth. My name is Marie. Most people in Topeka still call me Mrs. Patterson from my teaching days, though my daughter Isabella hasn't called me anything in almost 2 years. Not until the invitation arrived. I live alone in a cozy ranch house near the lake, about 30 minutes from Kansas City. The same house I bought after Robert. My ex-husband left us when Bella was 7 and Thomas was 10. It's peaceful now, filled with the gentle sounds of my cat Mimi purring in sunny spots and the wind chimes on the back porch. The walls that once echoed with homework help and bedtime stories now hold certificates of appreciation from grateful students and parents, evidence of a career spent nurturing other people's children. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, printed on expensive cardstock with gold embossing. You're invited to celebrate the upcoming arrival of baby Parker. It read with Isabella and her husband David's names underneath in elegant script. 2 years of silence and now this. Not a phone call to share the news. Not even a text message, just a formal invitation delivered like a business obligation. I should have thrown it away. Part of me wanted to. But after spending my career helping struggling families reconnect, I couldn't help hoping this might be Isabella's way of reaching out. That hope had sustained me through many disappointments before. But hope, I was learning, could be a dangerous thing when it's not grounded in reality. I called Thomas first. My son, the corporate lawyer, the one who still sends birthday cards and shows up for major holidays, though always with excuses about why his wife Sarah and their children couldn't make it. The one who claims to want peace in the family but somehow always validates his sister's perspective when push comes to shove. "Mom, you should definitely go," he said, his voice carefully neutral in that way. Lawyers perfect. Bella's been different since the pregnancy. More reflective. She's mentioned wanting to reconnect with family. "Has she said anything specific about me?" I asked, trying not to sound too eager. A pause that lasted too long. "She talks about wanting her child to know his grandmother." I didn't mention that knowing me would require her to actually speak to me first, or that the grandmother comment felt conditional, like I was being evaluated for the role rather than naturally holding it. Instead, I said, "I miss her too." The way things used to be meant Isabella living in my house for 8 months after her first divorce, rent-free, while I worked extra hours tutoring struggling students to cover both our expenses. It meant me watching her son from her previous marriage every weekend so she could build her marketing consultancy, never complaining when she picked him up hours late. It meant me co-signing the loan for her MBA program because her credit was still recovering from her divorce. Then watching her use that education to climb into social circles where a retired schoolteacher mother became an embarrassment. I spent $400 I could barely afford from my teacher's pension on a handmade baby quilt from a local artisan, each stitch carefully crafted in soft blues and greens. I had my hair styled at the salon where Mrs. Rodriguez, one of my former students' mothers, still cuts hair and always asks about my successful children. I bought a new dress that flattered my figure and made me feel confident. I even rehearsed what I might say to Isabella, keeping it light and positive, focusing on the future rather than dwelling on our fractured past. The baby shower was held at the Ritz-Carlton in their private dining room, a space that screamed wealth and status with its crystal chandeliers and panoramic city views. I recognized some faces from Isabella's professional network, a few relatives from David's prominent family. Thomas was there with Sarah, though they seemed absorbed in conversation with David's parents and barely acknowledged my arrival. Isabella looked stunning in a flowing cream dress, her pregnancy giving her skin a radiant glow. She had always been the charismatic one, the child who could charm teachers and win over any room. She spotted me across the room, and for just a moment I saw something flicker in her eyes. Surprise, relief. But then her expression shifted to polite acknowledgement, nothing more. She approached me with the kind of smile she used for networking events. "Marie," she said, using my first name rather than Mom. I wasn't sure you'd come. Of course I came, I replied, reaching for a hug that she returned with barely concealed stiffness. You look absolutely beautiful. Pregnancy suits you. She nodded, her eyes already scanning the room for someone more important to greet. Thank you for coming. There's food and drinks at the far end. I should get back to hosting. And just like that, she was gone, surrounded by co-workers who fawned over her growing belly and asked about nursery themes. I found a quiet table in the back, placed my carefully chosen gift among the impressive display of presents already arranged on white-clothed tables. The cost of some of these gifts likely exceeded my monthly pension. A server offered me champagne, but I requested water instead. I wanted to stay completely present for whatever was about to unfold. An hour passed with me making polite conversation with David's cousin, who didn't know who I was, and watching Isabella hold court like the successful professional she'd become. My gift remained buried under an avalanche of designer items, and then it was time for speeches. David spoke first, thanking everyone for their generosity and support. Thomas, surprisingly, offered a toast about family bonds and new beginnings, though his eyes never met mine during his remarks. Then Isabella stood, radiant and confident, one hand protectively cradling her belly. I want to thank all of you for being here today, she began, her voice carrying the authority she'd developed in her marketing career. Starting a family feels overwhelming, but knowing we have such incredible support makes all the difference. She turned toward an elegantly dressed woman in her 60s, Grace Parker, David's mother, who sat at the head table wearing pearls and a satisfied smile. But I especially need to thank someone who has become like a mother to me over these past few years. Someone who showed me what unconditional love and wisdom really look like. Patient, understanding, and always available when I need guidance. My chest tightened. After all these years, was this finally the moment? Grace, Isabella continued, her voice thick with emotion. This celebration is really for you. The room seemed to blur around me as she raised her glass higher. Grace Parker is the woman who taught me how to be the person I am today. She will be the one and only true grandmother my son will ever need. The applause was thunderous. Grace stood gracefully, accepting embraces and congratulations, while Isabella beamed beside her. David looked proud, Thomas was clapping politely, and nobody seemed to remember that there was another grandmother sitting in the back corner, watching her entire identity get handed to someone else. I stood quietly and walked out. No dramatic exit, no scene. Just a retired teacher leaving a party where she was clearly surplus to requirements. Nobody called after me or seemed to notice my departure. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for several minutes, feeling strangely calm. 25 years of teaching had shown me many types of cruelty, but this was something new. This was deliberate erasure. Every disappointment, every dismissal, every time I'd made excuses for Isabella's behavior crystallized into one clear understanding. I had been enabling my own mistreatment for years. No more. I spent the next 3 days in careful reflection. The way I'd learned to process difficult situations during my master's program in educational psychology. This wasn't a moment for emotional reaction. It was time for strategic response. I made 4 phone calls. The first was to Margaret Williams, my attorney, who had helped me establish my will and estate planning after my divorce. The second call was to Lucas Chen, a private investigator I'd met through the literacy program where we both volunteered. Lucas had offered his services if I ever needed help with anything, though I'd never imagined I would. The third call was to Dr. Susan Rodriguez, my former colleague who now worked as a family therapist. I needed professional perspective on what I was about to do. The fourth call was to a secure storage facility, where I arranged for a climate-controlled unit with 24-hour access. That night, I began the work of documenting my relationship with my children. 25 years of teaching had made me meticulous about record-keeping, and I applied those same skills to cataloguing every financial contribution. Every emergency I'd handled, every sacrifice I'd made. Not out of bitterness, but out of a need for clarity. By dawn, I had filled several boxes with photo albums, financial records and correspondence. Evidence of a relationship I was about to redefine completely. When Thomas called to ask why I'd left the shower early, I was ready with a calm response. I felt unwell. I didn't want to disrupt Isabella's special day. Oh, he sounded relieved that there wouldn't be family drama to manage. Well, Isabella wanted me to tell you that she appreciated the quilt. It was really thoughtful. I'm glad she liked it, I said, my voice perfectly pleasant. The quilt that had been buried under more expensive gifts and never actually opened. Listen, Mom, about what Grace said at the shower. You know how Isabella gets emotional during pregnancy. She didn't mean anything by it. I understand perfectly, Thomas. For the first time in years, I understand exactly what I need to do. The first package arrived at Isabella's upscale home in Kansas City at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, requiring signature confirmation. Inside was a professional leather portfolio with 2 distinct sections. The first contained 25 years of thank you letters from students and parents, teaching awards, appreciation certificates, and newspaper clippings about my contributions to childhood literacy programs. The second section was labeled Financial Records Isabella Parker 2015-2023 and contained 8 years of meticulously organized bank statements, receipts and loan documents, every cent I'd given her, every bill I'd paid, every financial rescue mission I'd mounted, detailed with dates and amounts totaling just over $189,000. Attached was a cover letter written on my professional letterhead. Dear Isabella, as an educator, I believe in the power of documentation and evidence-based learning. Section 1 demonstrates what your biological mother accomplished during her career in service to children and families. Section 2 provides a comprehensive record of my financial investment in your adult life. Since you've identified Grace Parker as your preferred maternal figure, please consider this my final report card on our relationship. With professional courtesy, Marie Patterson, M.Ed. My phone rang that afternoon while I was preparing materials for my evening adult literacy class. Mimi was curled in a patch of sunlight, her purr a soothing counterpoint to Isabella's shrill voice. "What the hell is this supposed to prove?" she demanded, clearly agitated. "Hello, Isabella. I assume you received my educational materials." "Educational materials? This is manipulation." "A bunch of old thank you letters and financial records. What are you trying to accomplish?" I continued organizing my lesson plans, my voice remaining calm and measured. "I'm providing comprehensive documentation. You declared Grace Parker to be your true mother figure, so I thought you should understand exactly what you were replacing. The financial records are simply factual evidence of our relationship dynamic." I was emotional at the shower. Pregnant women say things they don't mean. Do they? I asked mildly, drawing on my years of counseling struggling students and their families. In my experience as an educator, emotional moments often reveal our truest feelings. Your speech was quite articulate and specific. So this is revenge? You're going to punish me for hurting your feelings with this? This accounting? I set down my pen and looked out at my garden, where spring flowers were beginning to bloom. Not punishment, Isabella. Education. It's what I've dedicated my life to providing. Consider this a final lesson in cause and effect. This is ridiculous. I'm hanging up. Before you do, I said, my voice still perfectly controlled, you might want to suggest that Thomas check his mail tomorrow. His educational materials will be equally comprehensive. Thomas received a similar portfolio, but his contained additional materials that demonstrated the thoroughness of my educational approach. Along with financial records documenting my support over the years, Lucas Chen had provided printed emails and text messages between Thomas and Isabella. Conversations about managing the Marie situation, strategies for limiting my involvement in their lives while still benefiting from my support. Discussions about keeping their children away from my outdated influence. His call came during my evening walk around the lake. "Mom, how did you get those private messages?" "Hello, Thomas. Did you find the educational materials enlightening?" A long pause. "This isn't like you. You're not vindictive." "You're absolutely right," I said, watching the sunset reflect off the water. "I've never been vindictive. I've been accommodating, understanding, and endlessly forgiving. As an educator, I'm curious, how has that approach served me in our relationship? If this is about Isabella's comments at the shower, it's about 20 years of being treated like a resource rather than a person, Thomas. It's about discovering through documented evidence that my own children see me as an embarrassment, while systematically taking advantage of my generosity. People say things they don't mean when they're frustrated. Perhaps, I conceded, drawing on my training in educational psychology. But when those things are said consistently over years to multiple people, they represent a pattern of behavior, not temporary frustration. What do you want from us? An apology? I paused to watch a family of ducks glide across the lake. I don't want anything from you, Thomas. That's the fundamental shift you need to understand. I'm done wanting your respect, your time, your acknowledgement. I'm done hoping you'll mature into the adults I raised you to be. Are you cutting us off? His voice carried a note of panic I hadn't heard since he was a child, afraid of thunderstorms. I'm implementing new classroom management techniques, I said, using language he might better understand. There will be 2 more educational deliveries, and then our lesson plan will be complete. The third delivery contained copies of my revised will and estate planning documents, professionally bound with a cover letter explaining my educational philosophy behind the changes. 50% of my assets would go to the educational foundation I'd established for underprivileged children. 25% to the adult literacy program where I volunteered. 25% to a trust fund for any grandchildren who sought contact with me after reaching age 18, bypassing their parents entirely. The cover letter read, "After careful consideration and professional consultation, I have restructured my estate to reflect my core values as an educator. These funds will support individuals who demonstrate genuine appreciation for learning and personal growth. Documentation of the irrevocable trust ensures these wishes cannot be contested." Isabella called, screaming about family loyalty and moral obligations. I let it go to voicemail. Thomas sent multiple texts requesting an emergency meeting. I didn't respond. The final delivery was the most pedagogically sophisticated because it struck at something deeper than money or pride. It was about memory, identity, and the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. Using skills I developed in creating educational materials, I had spent weeks carefully altering photographs, digitally replacing my image with Grace Parker's in every family photo I could access. Every school event, every birthday party, every graduation ceremony now showed Grace as the loving maternal figure. I had effectively erased myself from their documented history and replaced myself with the woman Isabella wished had raised her. The accompanying letter explained, as your preferred mother figure, Grace Parker should be featured in your family memories. I have corrected the historical record to reflect your stated preferences. Consider this my final gift. A childhood featuring the mother you actually wanted. Isabella arrived at my door 3 hours after receiving her package. Her face streaked with tears, Thomas close behind her. For a moment, seeing them both on my doorstep, I felt a familiar tug of maternal instinct. Then Isabella spoke and the moment passed. "How could you destroy our family photos?" she demanded, clutching the box of altered memories. I looked at her calmly, drawing on decades of experience managing emotional students and distraught parents. "I thought you'd prefer Grace in them." "Wasn't that your clearly stated wish?" "This is sick," she spat, her voice breaking. "These are irreplaceable memories." "Are they?" I asked, genuinely curious in the way I'd learned to question students' assumptions. "You made it clear that your real memories should feature your true mother figure. I simply corrected the historical record to match your stated preferences." Thomas stepped forward, always the mediator. "Mom, what Isabella said was wrong, but this response is extreme." "Is it?" I gestured for them to enter, though every professional instinct told me to maintain boundaries. "Please, come in. Let's discuss this rationally." My living room was immaculate, cleared of most photos and mementos from their childhood. The space felt lighter, less burdened by sentiment. In their place hung certificates of appreciation from grateful students and their families. "What I've done," I said calmly, "is provide practical application of educational theory." Isabella made her feelings crystal clear to a room full of witnesses. "I'm simply aligning documented evidence with her stated preferences." "But these are our childhood memories," Isabella protested, pulling out a photo of her altered 5th birthday party. "Your childhood included a mother who sacrificed her social life to attend every soccer game, every school play, every parent-teacher conference. A mother who took out loans to pay for your college education and co-signed for your business ventures. That mother was apparently so inadequate that you publicly wished for a replacement." Thomas ran his hand through his thinning hair, a gesture so like his father it made my chest tighten briefly. "What's your endgame here, Mom? You've cut us out of your will, altered our family photos and sent us itemized records of everything you've ever done for us. What do you want?" "I want nothing from either of you," I said, and for the first time in years, I meant it completely. "That's the fundamental lesson you need to grasp." They exchanged glances, clearly not believing me. "I've spent decades wanting your respect, your consideration, your inclusion in your adult lives. I'm finished wanting. I'm finished hoping. I'm finished making excuses for behavior that, if it came from any of my students' parents, would be considered unconscionable. Isabella's hand moved protectively to her belly. So you're abandoning your grandchild, your own family? I'm accepting the family structure you've established. I corrected her, using the patient tone I'd perfected with difficult parents. Grace Parker is your chosen maternal figure. She can fulfill the grandmother role as well. This isn't you, Thomas said desperately. The mother we know wouldn't do this. The mother you knew was performing a role, I replied. Playing the part of the endlessly giving, endlessly forgiving parent because I thought that's what good mothers did. That performance has ended. I stood, making it clear the consultation was ending. I have boundaries now, children. Professional ones. I will not be attending family functions where I'm treated like an obligation. I will not be providing financial support to adults who show me no respect. I will not be available for crisis management or emotional labor for people who consider me an embarrassment. Isabella made a choking sound. You can't mean this. I absolutely mean it, I said, opening the front door with the same finality I'd used to end countless parent conferences. Grace Parker wanted to be your true mother. Now she can handle all the responsibilities that come with that role. After they left, I sat in my peaceful living room with Mimi purring on my lap, reviewing my lesson plans for tomorrow's adult literacy class. My phone buzzed with frantic messages from both of them, but I had already arranged for a new phone number. The next day, I updated my emergency contacts at work and closed my social media accounts. Dr. Rodriguez, my former colleague, had warned me this might feel like grief. Instead, it felt like the relief a teacher experiences when a disruptive student finally faces appropriate consequences. That night, I dreamt of wide-open classrooms filled with eager students who valued learning, who said thank you, who grew up to make me proud. I woke feeling lighter than I had in years, as if I'd finally stopped carrying the weight of other people's ungrateful expectations. The next day, I changed my phone number permanently. The day after that, I closed my social media accounts completely. A week later, I began expanding my volunteer work at the literacy program, taking on 3 additional students who reminded me daily why I'd chosen education as my calling. I waited for regret to come, for maternal instinct to override my resolve. It never did. Instead, something else bloomed in the spaces where worry and disappointment had lived for so long. Something that felt remarkably like peace. 3 months passed. Autumn arrived, painting the trees in my neighborhood with brilliant oranges and deep reds. I planted new bulbs in my garden, tulips and daffodils that would burst through the soil next spring, a promise to myself about endurance and renewal. I hadn't heard from either of my children since that confrontation in my living room. No calls from new numbers, no unexpected visits, no messages passed through mutual acquaintances. It was as if they had finally accepted the boundaries I'd established. Or perhaps they were simply waiting for me to break first, to reach out and apologize for daring to value myself. If so, they would be waiting a very long time. I settled into new rhythms that brought me genuine fulfillment. Mornings at the literacy center helping adults who had slipped through educational cracks learn to decode the written world around them. Afternoons tutoring high school dropouts working toward their GEDs. Evenings with Mimi and books I'd always meant to read, or documentaries about subjects that fascinated me, time that had always been sacrificed to someone else's crisis. It was during one of those quiet evenings when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment I considered not answering. But curiosity won out. Standing on my porch, looking uncomfortable in a suit that seemed slightly too tight, was David, Isabella's husband, the father of my unborn grandchild. Mrs. Patterson, he said, formal and stiff. We had never been particularly close, David and I. He'd always seemed slightly intimidated by me, though I'd never given him reason to be. David, I replied, not inviting him in. What brings you here? He shifted his weight, glancing back at his car in the driveway as if contemplating escape. I'm here about Isabella. Of course he was. In our few interactions over the years, David had never once sought me out for any other reason. Is she all right? She's fine. Well, physically fine. He ran a hand through his hair. Look, can I come in? This is awkward enough without having to do it on your doorstep. I considered refusing, but again curiosity prevailed. I stepped aside, allowing him into my home. David stood awkwardly in my living room, declining my perfunctory offer of tea or coffee. Finally, he spoke. Isabella doesn't know I'm here. She'd be furious if she knew. Then why are you here, David? He sighed deeply. Because she's miserable. She cries constantly. Her blood pressure is elevated, which isn't good for the baby. She's not sleeping, and it's affecting our marriage, our preparation for parenthood, everything. I waited, saying nothing. This was not my problem to solve. She made a mistake, he continued. What she said at the shower, it was cruel and thoughtless. I told her so at the time, but she was what? I prompted, my voice neutral. Showing off, he admitted, looking pained. For Grace, for my family. They have money, status. Isabella's always felt like she has to prove she belongs with us. And rejecting her own mother publicly was her way of proving that? I asked, unable to keep a slight edge from my voice. David winced. It was wrong. She knows it was wrong. What I'm trying to say is she's genuinely sorry. Really sorry. And yet she's not the one standing in my living room saying so. She's afraid, he said simply. Afraid you won't forgive her. Afraid of what you'll say. And after what you did with those photos, those financial records, she's hurt and angry too. I see, I said, though in truth, I found his reasoning both predictable and disappointing. The audacity of it to hurt someone deeply, then be angry when they refuse to absorb that hurt silently. So what exactly are you asking of me, David? He straightened, seeming to gather his courage. Come to the hospital when the baby is born. Be part of your grandson's life. Let Isabella apologize properly in person. Start fresh. I almost laughed at the simplicity of it, as if years of disrespect and my public humiliation could be erased with a hospital visit and an apology offered only under duress. And if I refuse? I asked, curious about his response. David looked genuinely confused. But he's your grandson, your family. Yes, I agreed, just as Isabella and Thomas are my children, my family. And yet that connection didn't prevent them from treating me with contempt for years. Why would it be different with a grandchild? Because it's a chance to break the cycle, he said with surprising insight. To start over. I studied him, wondering if he really believed what he was saying, or if this was just another manipulation, another attempt to restore the status quo. Did you know, I said conversationally, that after Isabella's first divorce, I supported her financially and emotionally for almost a year? That when she decided to pursue her MBA, I co-signed educational loans because her credit was damaged? That when her consulting business struggled initially, I provided bridging loans that were never repaid? David looked away. I knew some of it. And did you know that when Thomas lost his job 4 years ago, I cashed in part of my retirement savings to help him make mortgage payments until he found work again? Or that I've never once been invited to spend a holiday with him and his family, despite living less than 40 miles away? Mrs. Patterson. The point, David, is not to catalogue their failures or my sacrifices. The point is that relationships, even family relationships, require reciprocity, respect and genuine care to survive. For too long, I convinced myself that maternal love meant accepting scraps of affection and basic courtesy in return for complete devotion. I was wrong. He was silent for a long moment. So that's it? You're just done with them? With all of us? I'm done with one-sided relationships, I clarified. I'm done being taken for granted. I'm done making excuses for people who should know better. And the baby? He said. He's innocent in all this. A predictable appeal, but not unexpected. Yes, he is, I agreed. And when he's old enough to seek me out on his own, should he wish to, I'll welcome him. My will provides for him directly when he turns 18, bypassing his parents entirely. David's eyebrows shot up at that information. You've really thought this through. I've had decades to think about it, David. Decades of hoping things would change naturally, that my children would mature into the kind of adults who treat others, including their mother, with basic dignity. I was wrong to wait so long. He stood, recognizing defeat when he saw it. Isabella's due in 3 weeks. If you change your mind. I won't, I said, not unkindly. But I appreciate your effort today. It shows character. At the door, he paused. For what it's worth, I told Isabella she was wrong. About what she said at the shower, about how she's treated you. I've always respected you, Mrs. Patterson. Thank you, David. I hope you'll be a better parent than your wife has been a daughter. After he left, I sat in my darkening living room, Mimi purring on my lap, and waited again for regret, for doubt, for the maternal longing that society had always promised would override all other considerations. It never came. Instead, I felt a curious sense of validation. David's visit had confirmed what I'd long suspected, that my children saw my love as a resource to be exploited rather than a relationship to be nurtured. Even now, facing the consequences of her actions, Isabella couldn't bring herself to approach me directly, to take responsibility without qualification. My phone buzzed with a text from the Literacy Centre coordinator, asking if I could take on an additional student next week. I replied immediately that I would. As I set the phone down, I realized I was smiling. This, then, was the unexpected gift of my children's rejection. The freedom to say yes to a life that served me, not just them. The space to discover who Marie Patterson was when she wasn't defined by maternal sacrifice and endless forgiveness. 3 weeks later, I received a birth announcement in the mail. Alexander David Parker, 7 lbs, 3 Oz, 21 inches long. There was a photo of a red-faced newborn wrapped in the blue quilt I'd left at the shower, and a handwritten note from Isabella. Your grandson, if you choose to meet him. Please call me. I placed the announcement on my mantel next to a framed photograph from my recent museum fundraiser. I looked at the baby, my grandson, and felt a complicated mixture of emotions. Not regret, not exactly, but acknowledgement of what might have been. In another version of this story, I might have called, but some bridges once burned should remain ashes. My life settled into patterns that brought me genuine satisfaction. Volunteering at the Literacy Centre, tending my expanded garden, occasional travel with friends from the museum board, where I now served as education coordinator. I had even begun dating Nathan more seriously, though we both agreed that friendship formed a better foundation than romance at our age. I sold the house where I'd raised my children and bought a smaller place closer to the lake. It had a beautiful sunroom where Mimi could nap in patches of warm light, and a garden that burst with wildflowers every spring. I felt no nostalgia leaving the old house behind. It had served its purpose, just as I had served mine in my role as their mother. Occasionally, news of Isabella and Thomas reached me through the educational community grapevine. Thomas had been passed over for partner at his law firm. Isabella's marketing consultancy was struggling after losing several major clients. Their son, my grandson, was apparently a bright, curious toddler with David's steady temperament, rather than Isabella's dramatic tendencies. None of this information stirred me to action. I observed it with the detached interest one might have in former students you'd lost touch with, recognizable but no longer emotionally engaging. Until the day Grace Parker died, I heard about it from Nathan, who had attended the same charity function where she'd suffered a massive stroke. Collapsed right there during the silent auction, he told me over coffee. Gone before the ambulance arrived. I nodded, absorbing the information without comment. Nathan, who knew my history through the carefully edited version I'd shared, watched me closely. Will you reach out to your daughter? I imagine she's taking it hard. No, I said simply. That chapter is closed. He accepted this without judgment. One of the qualities I most appreciated about him. 3 days later, as I was planting new rose bushes along my garden path, a car pulled into my driveway. I straightened, brushing dirt from my knees, and watched as Thomas emerged, looking older than his 35 years. Mom, he said, approaching cautiously as if I might flee or turn him away immediately. Perhaps I should have. Thomas, I replied. What brings you here? He gestured vaguely to my garden. New place looks nice. Suits you. I waited, not making this easy for him. After a moment, he sighed. You've heard about Grace Parker? Yes. Isabella's devastated. David's struggling too, honestly. The funeral's tomorrow. I said nothing. My silence became a question in itself. Look, Mom, he said, running a hand through hair that had more grey than I remembered. I know things are complicated between us. I know we've made mistakes, but Isabella needs her mother right now. Her real mother. The irony was so rich it could have fertilized my entire garden. Does she? The same mother she publicly rejected? The one she wished had never raised her? Thomas winced. She was wrong. We were both wrong about so many things. Yes, I agreed. You were. A beat of silence stretched between us. So, you won't come? Not even to support her during a time of grief? I regarded my son thoughtfully, this man I'd once known better than anyone. When Robert left us, I grieved. I was terrified, alone with 2 small children and no support system. Did either of you consider my grief then? Or any of the times after, when I faced loss or hardship on my own while still caring for you both? He looked away. That was different. How? Because acknowledging my pain might have required you to see me as a person with feelings, not just a resource to be utilized. We were kids, he said defensively. And when you were adults? When I had surgery 3 years ago? And neither of you offered to help during my recovery? When my sister died? and you both sent flowers but couldn't be bothered to attend the funeral. Was my grief less real then, Thomas? Less deserving of support? He had no answer for that. I turned back to my roses, kneeling again in the soft earth. Isabella made her choice clear at that baby shower. Grace was her true mother. Now she's lost that mother, and I'm sorry for her pain. Truly. But I am not a backup plan to be pulled off the shelf when convenient and discarded when no longer needed. It's not like that, he protested weakly. It's exactly like that, I replied, tamping soil around a new plant. And we both know it. Thomas stood there for several long moments, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Finally, he spoke again. There's something else. Something you should know. I looked up, curious despite myself. David left Isabella 3 months ago, filed for divorce. He has primary custody of Alex. The business is bankrupt. She's not doing well, Mom. Grace was helping her financially, and now that's gone too. I absorbed this information, waiting for the maternal concern to overwhelm my resolve. It didn't come. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I meant it. Suffering brought me no joy, not even the suffering of those who had hurt me. But Isabella is an adult. She'll have to find her own way through this, just as I did when Robert left. Thomas's face hardened. So that's it? Sorry to hear that. Good luck. She's your daughter. Biology doesn't erase behavior, Thomas, I said, rising to my feet again. It doesn't entitle anyone to unlimited chances to inflict pain without consequence. What about forgiveness? He asked. Isn't that what mothers do? Forgive? I brushed the dirt from my gardening gloves, considering my words carefully. Forgiveness is possible when there's genuine remorse, changed behavior, and an understanding of the harm caused. Without those elements, it's not forgiveness. It's permission. Permission to continue treating someone as disposable. She's remorseful, he insisted. We both are. Are you? Or are you suddenly aware that you've lost your safety net, your emotional support system, your financial backup plan? I shook my head. Remorse that appears only when you need something isn't remorse at all, Thomas. It's manipulation. He stared at me for a long moment, perhaps truly seeing me for the first time in decades. You've changed, he said finally. No, I corrected him. I've simply stopped pretending to be someone I'm not. Someone who would accept crumbs of respect in exchange for unconditional love and support. What can we do? He asked, his voice smaller than I'd heard it since he was a child, afraid of thunderstorms. How do we fix this? That's the point, Thomas. You don't fix it. Some things once broken stay broken. You learn to live with the consequences of your actions, just as I've learned to live with mine. And Alex, your grandson, he's innocent in all this. Yes, he is, I agreed. And as I told David when he visited, when Alex is old enough to seek me out independently, I'll welcome him. Until then, he has his father, who seems to be a decent man. And he has you, I assume. Thomas nodded. I try to help where I can. Then he'll be fine. I turned toward my house. I have a lunch appointment, Thomas. I need to get cleaned up. He made no move to leave. Will you at least think about coming to the funeral? For closure, if nothing else? I paused at my back door. I found my closure 2 years ago when I finally accepted that the children I raised were not the adults I'd hoped they'd become. I wish you and Isabella well, Thomas. I truly do. But my well-wishing will be from a distance. After he left, I showered and dressed for my lunch with Nathan and 2 other friends from the museum board. As I applied lipstick in the mirror, I studied my reflection, the silver in my hair, the lines around my eyes, the set of my mouth. I looked serene, unburdened. That evening, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine, watching fireflies illuminate the gathering dusk. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. Funeral is at 2 p.m. tomorrow. First Presbyterian, just in case. I didn't reply. Instead, I booked an afternoon tour at a botanical garden 2 hours away, something I'd been meaning to do for months. The next day, as Grace Parker was laid to rest, I walked among exotic flowers and lush greenery, taking photographs of particularly beautiful specimens. I felt no guilt, no regret, no sense of obligation unfulfilled. What I felt was something rarer and more precious, the peace that comes from acknowledging your own worth, from refusing to participate in relationships that diminish rather than enhance your life, from recognizing that some wounds can't be healed through forgiveness alone. Some require the cauterization of complete separation. My children had made their choices. I had made mine. And in doing so, I had finally become the mother they deserved. One who taught them through unyielding consequence rather than hollow words that how we treat others matters. That respect is not optional in meaningful relationships. that love without boundaries is not love at all, but servitude. It was perhaps the most important lesson I would ever teach them. Whether they learned it or not was beyond my control. But I had at last learned it myself, and that was enough.